of the Madeira Beach Planning Commission to order. If we could have roll call, please, Ms. Gwen.
Sure. Commissioner Rappa?
Present.
Commissioner Clyott, she's not attending tonight, and Commissioner Hearn?
Present.
Second Vice Chair Wyckoff?
Present.
And First Vice Chair Belaski.
Here.
I forgot to mention that Chairman Noble is not attending tonight as well. That's why you're sitting in his place.
Thank you. Okay, now, the next order of business is election of officers. Do we have any nominations from our planning commission?
And do remember you have, actually we're a little behind on this because of quorum issues and just other procedural issues, but you need a chair, a vice chair, and a second vice chair. And you can nominate people who are not here. That's what happens when you don't show up sometimes.
I nominate Michael Noble to continue as chairman.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Perfect. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oh, we gotta have roll call. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Roll
Yes.
call. Okay.
Okay, Commissioner Hearn?
Yes.
Second Vice Chair Wyckoff?
Yes.
Commissioner Rappa?
Yes.
And First Vice Chair Belaski.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next office is for the office of First Vice Chair. Do we have any nominations?
I will nominate
Robin.
Robin.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second that.
Okay, roll call, please.
Okay. Second Vice Chair Wyckoff?
Yes.
Commissioner Hearn?
Yes.
Commissioner Rappa?
Yes.
Excuse me. And First Vice Chair Belaski.
Yes. Thank you. Now, on the office of Second Vice Chair, do we have a nomination?
I'll nominate Michael.
I'd like to second that nomination. Roll call vote.
All right. Second Vice Chair Wyckoff?
Sure. Yes.
Commissioner Hearn?
Yes.
Commissioner Rappa?
Yes.
And First Vice Chair Belaski.
Yes. Okay, thank you, commissioners, for that. Okay, approval of the minutes. Does anyone on the Planning Commission have any additions, deletions? If not, may I have a motion to approve?
I move we accept the minutes as presented.
Second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call vote.
Okay. Commissioner Rappa?
Yes.
Commissioner Hearn?
Yes.
Second Vice Chair Wyckoff?
Yes.
And First Vice Chair Belaski.
Yes. Thank you. And item 5 on the agenda is new business, and we have nothing new other than the agenda before us. Okay, item 6 is old business. We have a petition by the applicant, CBWG Development, LLC, to request rezoning approximately 0.55 acres of land located at 15408 Gulf Boulevard from R3 to PD to allow for a 6-story building of 5 floors of residential units and associated at grade parking as a multifamily tourist dwelling use. All right, if we could have our planning director speak to us on this request.
Yes, I would like, first of all, to beg your indulgence for 2 minutes while we find the control for the slide presentation, which is not up on the screen. So let me get that going for you. Otherwise, you can't see the presentation. Madam Chair and Commissioners, my apologies for the delay there. We are missing a piece of equipment, so we're going to do this the old-fashioned way, and I'll have to say, change the slide now, or something other like that. What you have before you is a request for a PD. This item came before you at the last meeting. At that time, the staff recommended continuance because the amount of information that we had wasn't adequate to answer all of the questions that staff had developed in the review. And one of the things that I pointed out at the time was that with PDs, we quite often don't have a complete review. Everything isn't in the site plan exactly as it will be built because of the amount of detail that's required. So often we recommend approval with a list of conditions that specifies all those things that normally will be provided later. There are certain things they aren't even able to provide us in the course of the zoning review because of state law. And so over time we'll have to adjust our requirements to better reflect what the state law requires now. This particular parcel is now up behind you. And it's called at this time Playa Brisa. It's at the property pretty much across the street over here at the windows. You can see the two taller buildings on either side of it out here. A little bit of history on the area. The building in question is that one which is outlined, the property's outlined in the red. You can see it's a pretty narrow piece of property. It goes well out into the beach. And it has been there since before the surrounding development was put in place. It's a two-story building, currently used as, I think, condo, and with quite a bit of turnover in terms of it being used more like a resort. In the 77 and 78, if you go back, Jenny, 77 and 78, the two taller buildings right next to us were built. As you can see, they were built considerably further towards the beach and pretty much cut off the property from its view and surrounded it on either side by parking. That's just the style of development that was put in place. You can see the rest of the line down the beach at the time. Those buildings are 10 and 11 stories high. You can see the difference in the scale of the building that's remaining. Okay, you can go on now. If we look at the site plan that was included, just shows where the building is now. The shaded areas, they're parking, as you saw. And the hashed line that you see on the beach side of the property there indicates the view lines from one of the, right now at the other buildings across and down the beach. You could go on. This is very difficult to see. I know we have difficulty with lighting in this room. This is the site plan with the layout of the building as proposed. You can see that they've decided to set it back behind the view line so that they didn't interfere with the view down the beach by either of the two properties next to it. I have to point out, because of property rights issues, that they're not obligated to do that. Their own view will be blocked in both directions looking down the beach. By law, you have only the right of the view in front of you along your property lines, and only as far as the property lines extend. Next. So we talked about this a little bit, and unfortunately you have to listen to some of it again because we have to make findings with the PD. This is a quasi-judicial hearing proceeding. It will go on to the commission, but we do have to make sure that we stipulate why something is or is not approvable. The purpose of the PD is to accommodate an integrated, well-designed development. The zoning and plans and standards are created specific to the site. That's important in this particular case because they are requesting a height greater than the code would allow. It's the same density and it meets the use requirements of the comp plan and the zoning code, but the height requirement is restrictive, just as we've discussed it is for all commercial properties or any property in town. So what they bring in as a part of their design and the specifications is a set of codes sometimes that are just specific to that site. In this case, they're asking for a height and a setback reduction for the parking, not the building itself, but for the parking. The intent of the PD is to provide flexibility in design where the development provides something to the community that cannot be provided otherwise, or where the property is does not have the development potential that they should by right have due to some circumstances that's also not in the best interest of the city to perpetuate. We want to assure the development is functional, high quality, compatible with adjacent nearby lands as much as can be possible, while allowing a reasonable use of the property. It has to further the planning goals of the community, and in most cases it would encourage mix of uses, but it is not required. The neighborhood meeting is required according to section 110, 392 of the city's code. That meeting was held, the first meeting as required was held, it was held here at City Hall. The neighboring properties were invited, however, that says owners and tenants. Actually, the only one property owner came to the first public hearing. There were videos and transcripts made of that hearing, and at the time the developers made no assurances or promises of any kind dealing with changes to design. That's important that you know if they do, because by code those have to be included in conditions, and we carefully monitor that anything they do make as a promise shows up in our conditions. In this case, they made no assurances of any kind. In addition, you know, we brought this to the Planning Commission last month, and after the meeting, several of the property owners came up and said that they were not aware of the item of the neighborhood meeting. They had not received notice. The developer had met the requirements for mailing, but we're not sure why. Some of them may not have been delivered. So in addition to that, there were a number of property owners who were not in town and so didn't receive the notice in time or were unable to attend because they live elsewhere during other months. And so the developer was agreeable to having a second neighborhood meeting to give people the opportunity to come in and list their concerns and get a full presentation of the proposal. That was held last week on February 6th. There were, I believe, 15 to 17 members in the room that signed up. We do have the sign-up sheets for that, and there was a video recording made of the meeting. And both of those meeting records will be entered into the public record, and the City Commission will have an opportunity to review them. According to the code, that record is reviewed by the City Commission, and so it doesn't always have to be, transcripts don't have to be disseminated to the Planning Commission necessarily. Again, no assurances were made at that meeting for specific changes. There were a lot of very specific concerns on the part of the surrounding property owners, and I see that there are a large number of them here tonight, so I think you'll be hearing a lot of those. The development intensity for, oops, that one's, there we go. This will give you a sense of the scale of the area that's looking directly at the two-story structure with the two larger buildings next to it. It did get kind of swallowed over time there. That disproportionality, which of course have had some effect on the property value over time too. Next. And this is looking north, and you can see that on the east side of Gulf Boulevard, there are other buildings right across from it that are in the neighborhood of 3-4 stories high. These are the buildings across the street. And looking back down south along Gulf, and again, you can see the smaller residential structures across the street. You can see from this view, which was provided by the, I think was this provided by us or the?
This is from Google Maps.
Okay, so it's a recent shot from Google, you can see the size of the two-story structure between the taller ones. And then on the opposite side, you can see that there's a building that is 3.5 with pitch stories in height. And this is another view from the air. There are several things that you have to find and review. One is that it's consistent with the comp plan and with zoning. In this case, no change or use of the designation has been requested for this PD. The use is permitted by both land use and zoning. We have to be consistent with standards and practices. This will be regulated in accordance with all adopted land development standards. Anything that's not specifically approved as a variance or change within this PD will have to meet all standards of the city. It will meet all provisions of stormwater management, traffic, safety, coastal development, and floodplain management. This is very important because we do not control approval on the roadways, either on Gulf or 150th. And I know that there were some letters submitted that address this and concerns that the neighbors have generally about traffic impact and intensity along the beach, and the impact of just not just the immediate traffic impacts, but just being able to get on and off in case of emergency. In order to have gotten this far, they had to have had a conceptual plan review from FDOT. We are not able to deny development based on our concerns on the road if DOT approves the traffic impact analysis because it is their roads and we don't have authority over their roads. So in order to get final approval, when they come back in with their final site plan, they will have to, at that point, submit FDOT's final approval for their design and verification that they have met all the methodology and study requirements, and that FDOT does indicate there is traffic capacity for the amount that they are going to be adding to the roadway. Keep in mind also that both for stormwater and for traffic, they already get credit for traffic or impacts they are already creating. And in the case of stormwater, we're actually be improving the situation and doing more filtration than is existing on the site. The design furthers comprehensive plan. It provides, this one does not provide retail, I apologize for that. But it does provide new parking and better ground level circulation. It reduces the parking footprint and the general footprint of the building, of the structure. It proposed, this one is that site, that some of this should have come out of there. That was from the last one. If you could go past that. But this is what we need to deal with, is the height restriction required for the PD. The Unified Development Plan facilitates distribution of density and building height requirements. And the PD is the only method for getting to a height that would allow the amount of density that is actually allowed on each property, because our height restrictions are pretty significant here. The other issue will be the setback issue, because they have requested a setback reduction on the side for the parking, not for the building. The new building will actually be narrower and further away from the lot lines than the existing building, but the parking is proposed to extend out into the setback, and I'm going to let them talk about the detail of designs when they get up. And that's the information on the setback. Development impact, as I said, they're going to have to show adequate capacity. The water, wastewater comes from the county. Of course, traffic is reviewed by DOT. SwiftMud reviews for runoff requirements, although we do also have our own drainage requirements that they must meet. The development, with inclusion of staff conditions, would serve the public interest in that it allows us to meet several of our infill and redevelopment requirements that are listed in the comprehensive plan. And it improves the built environment. The existing building is old and desperately in need of replacement, and generally will improve the aesthetics. It will enhance the value of some properties, the neighboring properties, although I know that we'll get comment from people across the street who believe that it will actually impact their property value negatively because of views. Again, we have to be careful about how much view we assure people, but you can definitely take input in regards to property value impacts by new development. We will meet the land development requirements because we will go through as a thorough site plan review in the end, and as I said, until all the responding agencies have provided us with indications that they do meet the code along with all the city code. And then again, when the building comes in, they have to meet the Florida Building Code and the floodwater management code. This area, as you know, being on the beach, the bottom ground floor will be opened specifically because of flood management concerns. So the staff recommends approval with the 15 conditions and all of their sub-condition sections, and do want to make you aware of the importance of our giving everybody an opportunity to speak, because I'm sure that they will have some comment about that. That approval recommendation for approval includes the proposed height addition and the setback with its landscaping for parking only, not for the building. We don't want there to be any confusion about the building going closer to the property line than is shown on their design plans.
Does that conclude your report?
It does, yes.
Thank you. Before we begin public comment, do any
Yes, before we do that, the petitioner has an opportunity to ask me questions, and then they have an
Right.
opportunity to make their own presentation.
I was going to ask if any commissioners would like to have questions to give you.
Why don't we hear what they have to say first?
Would you like to, okay, and let the public speak first then?
No,
Jane-
no, we cannot do that. The petitioner.
Oh, okay. Okay. Let us have the developer then. He can come and speak.
If you have questions of me to start with, you probably have to use the handheld and turn it on and make sure it's close. Takes it a second to,
Hello,
there you go.
my name is Mike Stalzer. I'm with CPWG, and we represent and are the developer. Am I to ask you questions, or are you?
If you
I don't have any
questions.
specific questions for you. If you have questions for me, I'll be happy to answer any questions from.
No, at this point then, if you have no questions for me, it would be your opportunity to make your presentation.
Okay. What we're proposing is to redevelop 15408 Gulf Boulevard to 5 stories of condominium over parking, most likely 10 to 12 units. Obviously, the product will be high-end, given it's on the beach. As Linda said, we're sliding the building back to protect the view of the existing buildings, up and down the beach as best as possible. We have to comply with all the city requirements for meeting the site plan requirements and DOT requirements and SWIFT-MUD requirements and Pinellas County utility requirements through the plan review. But basically, in a nutshell, that's it. It's a pretty straightforward development. We need a variance on height because we're going to go not to exceed, I think, 80 feet is proposed. And the parking, we have to maintain a 24-foot aisle width and an 18-foot stall depth. So when you add up those dimensions, we're going to encroach on the 5-foot landscape setback by 1.6 feet on each side. So instead of being 5 feet, we'll actually be 3.4 feet off of the property line. And you can kind of see on the north side, the parking is no longer than the building, and then on the on the south side, there's 3 or 4 spaces that project east from under the building. And the impervious cover for the improved site is basically the same as the impervious cover of the existing site, so there's really no change from that standpoint. And the green space is essentially the same or a little more, so you know, the landscaping will remain the same essentially.
Do you have any drawings or anything to help them?
We just have
Notice
we
the-
brought the one board with, we didn't bring the PowerPoint, but basically it's the same views as, you know, what Linda showed you. I believe you've all seen this from last week. The PowerPoint was better.
And I know you had an extensive PowerPoint before, in large part explaining the view
Correct.
corners and how you had set those. Could
Yeah,
you
what we
explain
did was we looked at the building. The southern building is, I guess, the way it's constructed, it's past the building, so looking back north, it's not an issue. It's really the northern building looking back south is the problem. So we looked at the sight line, we flew the property with a drone, and we created a video where we simulated the sight line looking out of the south building, looking, I guess that would be, or the north building looking southwest. And that's how we determined basically where to place the building. So we've just maintained that line, which if you look at the drawing, I guess would be the best thing to do. So that dashed line, it's on a diagonal. If you go to the north building, to the easternmost edge of their window, it hits the corner of the building to the south. So from that point going west is all they can see anyway. So that's the view we protected. And if you go to the building to the south, we're out of their sight line entirely. So we made every effort to be responsible when it came to protecting their views.
I think we have no questions, the staff has no questions.
I've got a question for you.
Go ahead.
With regard to the parking setback variance that you're looking for, is that all ground level parking?
It's all ground level, that's right. And most likely it'll be pavers in lieu of asphalt for the drainage.
By way of explanation, it's pretty common for us now to ask for pervious pavers and to put the drainage under the site because we have a lot of very
That was my next
compact
question.
sites.
Yeah. Thank you. Saw that one coming.
Yeah, we'll use a chamber system underneath the parking before we discharge it into DOTs right away. And then we'll have to get a discharge permit from DOT as well, a drainage permit.
So I have a question.
Go ahead.
The 2 buildings that this property is, how, to better understand, how tall is this building going to be in relationship to those 2?
It'll be 4 stories less than the building. I think they're 10 and 11.
Okay.
So we'll be
Yeah.
4 to 5 stories lower than the other buildings. 40 to 50 feet lower, basically. Right. Each story's, 10 to 12 feet, basically, as a rule of thumb.
I have a question. Mike, I'm sorry I didn't get your last name.
Stalzer,
You could spell it.
Stalzer.
Okay. So how many, how many condominiums do you plan on building to allow enough parking for
We
the,
have 10 to 12 units that we're proposing,
okay?
which requires 24 parking spaces, which we've provided 24. So if we only do 10, we'll probably eliminate 2 spaces,
Okay,
just to up the green space and reduce
okay,
impervious cover.
okay. Thank you.
Linda, do we know the existing number officially of the units that are there? that are,
There's 3 units currently there now.
thank you.
Okay.
Add anything?
Do planning commissioners have any more questions? Okay. Go ahead.
If you're using 10 units, will they just be bigger?
Correct. There'll be full depth of the building, 2 units per floor, roughly 2,400 square feet per unit.
So it won't affect the height?
No. No, once they set the constraints, you know, we have building coverage limitations, and we'll have a height limitation with the PD. Once that's established, we have to stay within that requirement to get approval from planning and zoning when they do the site plan review.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Is that it?
Yes. Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
If the commission is prepared to go to public comment, I would like to make a point that in the packet, you have been provided a number of letters offered in objection to the development from surrounding property owners. And for the sake of a clean record, I would like to give you some of those names. There's Teresa Sanchez and Maria Castillo, and Nancy and Florian Simala. I apologize if I've pronounced someone's name. Marianne and George Aitken, John Tolston. That was John and Chris Tolston. And there was one more here from a J. Dudka. And there are a number of issues that are addressed in these. They're primarily concerned about whether the scale of the development as 6 floors is appropriate. And then many people have expressed the concern that 6 floors is too intense in that location, that it would have an effect on the 100 or more residents immediately adjacent to it, that there is a problem with general traffic congestion on the beach, especially during emergency times or when the bridge is up on 150th, and the difficulty of getting off at those times. There was at the hearings also similar conversation and concerns about the view out the side of the buildings and things of that nature. And I know there's a lot of people here, and they'll probably reiterate or clarify for me, and they've got an opportunity to get up and make all of their comments heard. But I wanted to make sure that those in writing were acknowledged, the names were acknowledged. Thank you.
Linda, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Just so I'm clear, without a variance for the density, the existing density permits 8 units, is that correct, for that size lot?
Yes.
Because it's medium density, so it's 15 an acre normally, and we're at 0.55 acres. So they'd be permitted for 8 units, so we're really looking at a variance of 2 to 4 max units, right?
Well, that's true if they were built as condos. However, if they were built as hotels, I think they could get 32.
Right, because it's 60 units per acre for
Correct.
for hotel,
Right.
right, versus the 8 for regular
Correct.
condo.
And from the staff's perspective, we thought that the 10 to 12 for condos was preferable to 32 units of hotel, especially if they're not able to go high. They still can develop the property, but they would be 3 to 4 stories and would have to take up much more of the site with the building. They would pretty much take up the whole site that was available with the building.
Right, understood. Thank you.
We were hopeful that when we allowed them to go up, they could come in on the width of the buildings and reserve some view corridors along the beach.
Relative to the existing building, I couldn't tell in the drawings, they were a little bit fuzzy. That was kind of a small drawing.
Yes.
They're not occupying a much larger footprint just on the width anyway. No, the depth is plenty adequate, but on the width, there's no worsening of the setbacks, is
No,
there?
actually,
It's
it
less, is that correct?
reduces it, yes, it's a
Okay.
narrower building.
Okay.
So do we know what the restrictions on this condo is going to be for rental? Like, have they decided?
No, they have not decided. That typically you would not request that kind of detail. You can put use restrictions in a PD. They can't go more, you have to be careful because they have a certain right to use.
Yes.
Not to the maximum, but to the type of use that is required. So it's an option if it's going to be residential to specify what type of residential, but they have not proposed that level of
Because that
restriction on themselves.
That would determine how much more traffic, I think, a turnover would be, depending on the rental, what they decide as a unit.
Possibly, to tell you the truth, we get less traffic off of renters and beachgoers than you get off of a standard unit. Because they don't usually have as many cars and are here to be here, not to take the 10 trips that are usually accorded residential structures in and out every day. So it doesn't equate 1-to-1, but 32 hotel units would
That'd be a
definitely
way more intense use.
more intense use, yes.
For sure.
Now, Linda, and we are to understand that traffic is not to impact any of the deliberations that we have regarding this, as you gave us in your initial review.
Right. We can talk about access, how you get in and out of the building and in and out of the site, and how that activity will impact the surrounding area. In terms of the number of trips, what we do say is that it is an absolute condition of approval that they meet all DOT standards.
Absolutely, but DOT sets those standards for
Yes,
us.
and in addition, when you come in with a development, DOT will tell you exactly what methodology you have to use.
Yes.
And they review to make sure you stuck to that methodology. One of the other things they do is they require you to consider other developments that have already been approved. So all the trips that have already been approved for Town Center and to Holiday Isle or anything else that's within the impact area of this site would be considered by FDOT and had to be included in the methodology. It's as if they were already built.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we now open this up for public comment. When you please approach the podium, if you would give your name and address, and we welcome your comments. Turn that microphone. See it?
It is on.
There you go. You have to hold it up close.
That way?
There you go.
Soft-spoken, huh?
There you go.
I haven't been on stage in a while. I'm Dr. Kenneth McCool. Right? Oh, yeah. Oh, I got you. I'm Dr. Kenneth McCool. I live at 15,400 Gulf Boulevard. That's the shores of Madeira, and that's the parcel along the south edge of the parcel you're considering. Now, we have 48 condos and 96 residents. And the 96 people have voted for me to represent them here in front of you. So whatever I say, if I say I, it means we, 96 people. I also fully realize that your staff is recommending approval. And I'm here to tell you that the 96 senior citizens who have lived here for decades in that building are 100% against this development. Just take a look at that. Does this mean that everywhere along the strip where there's a narrow piece of available open space, that you're going to pop a building in like that? That's ludicrous. Now, I happen to speak from experience. It happens that I've been a developer in Massachusetts for the last 50 years. And usually, it's a hardship that requires a variance or a change. And as you know, they have not asked for a hardship for good reason. There is no hardship. I will also point out to you that about 8 or 9 years ago, I approached that property. There was a woman realtor, and I had considered taking down their building and putting up a high-rise. As soon as I saw the zoning and the R3 and all, I knew there'd be a big battle if I wanted to go up high. People want some exposure to the beach, and you're going to cut that exposure off. These elderly people living at the shores of Madeira are concerned about removal of some sunshine, cutting out the view of the intercoastal, and loss of value. And while I'm at it, I was at the last meeting, and I really felt bad. There was an older gentleman here that I don't know, and I don't represent him. But he looked at me and said, "What about me?" And it turns out that he lives directly across from this site, directly across from it. So I went myself and just took a walk over there. If you stand directly across where those houses are, that building goes up, these people get complete 100% loss of exposure to the ocean. They see nothing when a building goes up. And that's because that lot is so narrow. I mean, you could say it's buildable or we can work around that, but I think one thing you should keep in mind, you pass this and you're opening Pandora's box, because developers like me and these gentlemen are going to come along, and everywhere they see a little parcel like this, they're going to want to put up a building to make money. Now, I don't blame them for making money, but I don't want them sticking it to 96 elderly people. And that's what's happening here, and it's not fair. You know, I think being a physician, I'm obviously prejudiced, and I'll show you why. As you know, the traffic in this area is much worse now than it has been, and it's getting busier and busier. Madeira Beach is a nice place. It's quaint, and people like that. Now, with this traffic pattern increasing, picture yourself, you or I, in an ambulance having a heart attack, and they're trying to get over that Tom Stewart Causeway, and then the bridge opens. Any one of us could be in that position, and we could die. Very simple. So I think even though your Department of Transportation is going to pass or do whatever they want on the traffic, I think you got to use your own judgment and think, hey, look, if there's too much traffic here, somebody's going to die when they get to that bridge. These people that live there, Shores of Madeira, the other building, they expect you to protect them. I sure as hell expect you to protect me, and I live there. But these senior citizens, that's a different ballgame. They've got to be protected. And your vote should be in their best interest, not against their best interest. A vote for this is against their best interests. Thank you. Taking it.
Why don't we take that with you for a souvenir? Okay. Hi, my name's Gary Kleiner. I live in Surfside Tower, and Unit 506. I'm on the 5th floor. I went to the meeting last week, and I have spoken to people in our building about this project, and about a dozen different people, and we all seem to have the same opinion that that property is going to be developed. Doesn't matter if it's these people, it'll be somebody else, okay? And everyone I spoke to had nothing against this building being built. And the reason they weren't against it was for one reason and one reason only, that you were talking 10, 12 units. Obviously, they were going to be higher end, price-wise, and the impact on how many people would be in that area would be very little. So when we considered all those things, we felt this would be pretty good. Because first of all, if they rent these, I'm assuming that they're talking over $1 million a unit. I don't think they'd be renting them daily and weekly. I mean, if I had a unit and paid that much money for it, I certainly wouldn't do that. And if I did rent it, it certainly would be for a longer period of time. So we didn't think that would be any problem because, again, of the cost factor, what they're paying for the units. Everybody had the same opinion about one thing and one thing only, and that is, if this is approved, that no more than the units that they're asking to go into there, no more than that be allowed. If we're going to let them have 2 stories higher than what it stands now, they're asking for that. The 12 people I spoke with were in favor of that, but did not want to hear, just before they go to put the building up, say, oh, gee, we decided to make that 24 units instead of 12. So I'd like to hear from somebody that that's the plans they get, and if they are going to change it last minute, you don't get that approval for the 2 more stories. That's everybody's concern. So does somebody tell me that the plans you get, that's based on that, and they can't change it?
That is based on that, and and we would specify as a condition a maximum of 12 units if that's what the will of the board is. And that's generally what they've been coming in with in terms of density. They hadn't proposed anything higher than that. It was the 12. So that can be put in as the density for that particular project.
Density impact, because we felt you can't do any better than that. I mean, that's pretty limited how many people are going to take up that area. There was one other question I had, and I believe this is the gentleman I mentioned at the end of the meeting last week, was about the air handling units would be on the roof of that building. The 2 buildings beside them, ours on one side, the other building on the other side, that those units will make a lot of noise, and the higher you are, the more intense the sound. And he assured me that something could be done about that to have units that are quieter, or if they enclose them with something, that they could come up with something to do that, because that sound travels up. And if anybody lives in high rise, I'm on the beach there, I can hear people talking down on the beach better than the person standing beside them can hear them. It very much intensifies as it goes up. And so building on one side, building on the other side, that would bounce, that sound would just bounce all over, you know. And again, he assured me they could look into it and felt that they could do something about that, and that was the other factor. So those 2 factors can be assured. 12 of the unit owners have no problem with it whatsoever. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, I'm Dr. Peter Sukin. I live in the townhouses directly across the street, across Gulf Boulevard. If you could move back a couple slides. One that shows it straight forward from the beach. Yeah, I live in the townhouses directly behind there. And it was correct. There are actually, I would say, 3.5, 4 stories. I had spoke at the meeting the other night. I was kind of dismayed that there was no consideration, but I understand business is business, but there was no consideration whatsoever in the presentation that our view from our building is going to be totally taken away. I have some view of the ocean on the other side, but my main view is coming right through those two buildings. And being on the 4th floor, and now there's going to be 6 floors. It's a whole different story. And I made this statement last week, and I thought about some other things. I'm certainly concerned about losing view. When I moved here, my understanding was, and obviously there are variances as being discussed now, that originally it was 3 stories, so I was happy. I was happy as a lark. I was going to have this wonderful view, and after 7 years, I find that I'm going to lose it. I totally agree with what this gentleman, another doctor, had to say. With another, a few different prospects of things, that the vast majority of us living in this area are older people. We came here to, for many of us, it might be the last place we ever live. We came here to live in a nice, quiet neighborhood, have a nice view of the ocean, and to find that now, for me at least, I'm going to lose a good percentage of that, and for a number of people who have condos directly facing from either the south or the north, the new 6-story building, and they're going to lose some of what they had their dreams of having unobstructed views. Obviously, development does come and there are changes. But the other thing is that I urge, and it's somewhat, again, what you were saying, to really look at not solely the dollars in the sense, the development. Obviously, in Madeira Beach, there's going to be an awful lot of development. And development and progress in some things is wonderful. In other ways, progress and development create a lot of trouble. If you look at, for example, Clearwater Beach, you can hardly drive from one end to the other. We'd hate, obviously, to see Madeira look anything like that. But the other side of it, again, for us who, again, maybe our last place we're ever going to live, we'd like to live in a nice, quiet place. We'd like to have views of the water. We'd like to have the things that we had in mind when we purchased. And again, just as the same as he was asking, I'm asking you to represent us as well. We're not bringing in the extras and dollars and cents that Madeira Beach is going to make from all the development. However, we trust that you're going to look for our interests as well. Thank you.
Any other folks wish to comment?
Gerald Van Persum, Surfside Tower, Unit 401. Our unit is going to be facing this proposed building that you're talking about. And just for a point of record, I'd like to have a clarification on a few points. And I need this probably from Mike. By the way, I want to thank you for considering putting that back so you're not interfering with the view from the front. I'm not happy with the other end, and that's my question. And I asked you that distance, what's the distance from the road to the building, and you didn't know the answer. Do you know it now? Back from the road.
And I need to,
Okay. Okay. The building is going to be what size?
I'm going to need you to, if you're going to allow questions.
Yeah, it should just be for a comment,
Yes.
and then,
Then we'll have to get the questions answered afterward. The commission will take your notes and comments, and then they'll let him get up afterwards and answer to them.
Okay, my last question then. Is there going to be a completion date penalty?
We can.
That's
we can
another
address that.
question
Sure.
we will address.
That will be taken care of. There will be one?
well, we'll ask it.
You don't know?
This is not really an interactive between you and the petitioner. It's for you to make comment to us, raise your concerns, then we'll bring those concerns in the form of questions.
And
Just
then
protocol.
Bring the developer up, and he will answer those questions at the conclusion of the public comment.
Which would we win?
Tonight, right after.
Right.
Tonight.
Yes,
This
sir.
is public comment.
Yep.
And the developer can come up and answer those questions.
Yep. So if
So
you have
you know.
questions, let us ask them, let us know what they are, and I'm sorry.
please.
I'm sorry, my bad.
Yes,
Thank
he
you.
will answer your question.
I'm Nancy Tuma. I own apartment 1004.
Can you folks hear Nancy? You have to speak in the microphone, Nancy.
Okay. I'm Nancy Tuma.
Thank you.
I own apartment 1004 in the building to the north, which is Surfside Tower, 15462 Gulf Boulevard. I think Surfside Tower has 70 apartments or 70 condos or units. And Mr. Kleiner said that the 12 people he spoke to were approving of this. And I just wanted to say, while I am not strongly opposed to the concept of developing it, I certainly would be a lot happier if it stuck with the 8 condos, which I believe this gentleman said would normally be approved for a building in that area. That would both lower the height and make it less massive. So that part concerns me. I certainly do think having 32 rooms in a hotel would be a lot worse. But I don't think we should strive to just avoid the worst. We should strive for the best. I have concerns about the noise. Like other people, you know, for me, quiet is very important. I'm another senior citizen, and that's basically the vast majority of the owners in the 2 buildings are kind of elderly, and we like quiet, and that concerns me. I actually happen to have liked the appearance of the existing building. I sort of think it looks like a garden. I like all that greenery. I'm kind of worried. I know this is a really small point, but I'm on the landscaping committee for Surfside Tower, and I'm worried about reducing the setback in the parking area. Right now, there's some extremely attractive hibiscus plants along on 15408 boundary with us, and I'm afraid those hibiscuses aren't going to last. Sorry, I'm going to have to get some kind of throat aid, but maybe that's enough anyway. Thank you.
The floor is open for anyone else who cares to speak.
Hello, I'm Frank Hoft. I live at Surfside Tower, 15462 Gulf Boulevard, apartment 302. And, you know, we've heard some compelling, compassionate arguments against it today, but I'd just like to kind of focus on what's proposed and concerns that we have should it decide to go forward. And at the community meeting, it was discussed this 10 to 12 units was what was being looked at. Personally, the lower number of units, the better I think it is for many of us in the building now because it mitigates the noise. You've heard complaints about noise. Being on the beach, it just resonates. And the way that if you have something between the 2 towers, it's going to go back and forth. And we have a lot of problems with the building that's there now when they have certain rentals or events going on and music. It just bounces off the buildings till they turn it off at night. So that's a concern we had. Part of it had to do with the air handling units on the roof. And, you know, it was raised as a concern. No commitments were made, but other than to see if something could be done. So we appreciate that willingness to look into the problem and see what they could do. Our building has a 30-day rental minimum requirement, as I believe the Shores of Madeira. And if this was approved, I understand it could be one of the conditions of approval from what I've been hearing. So that was something we would like to be considered, and no liquor license or restaurant in the building, that kind of thing, as long as it's residential. That was kind of something that we all wanted to know, what was going to be the building use, as long as it's not the hotel environment. That was a major concern. And then the last item, which I've heard a lot today, is about getting onto and off of Gulf Boulevard. And there was some concerns because if you look at the map, the entranceways would be right next to each other with more vehicles coming in and out. It's hard enough to get out of there now. The developer did talk about realigning the entrance to the middle of the lot so that it made it a little bit easier to get in and out. And again, that was something that was discussed, but I don't see anywhere in the notes or minutes. So that was one thing we would like to be considered as you go forward. So the setbacks between buildings, the distance between the two buildings, because the people in our south tower, they do have rooms. If you look at the building, you see the glass. That's part of their unit, and it's a small room. And I'm not sure, depending on how far that building goes back, what the impact of it would be or what the rules or laws are. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any more comments?
My name is John Detka, and I also live at Shores of Madeira. I have lived there for a long period of time. Before I bought the Shores of Madeira, I checked the area out, starting way out at St. Pete Beach, went as far as Clearwater looking for a decent place to live. I found Shores of Madeira was one of the top places to be. It had no large abutting building that would restrict my view. The water was real close by. The traffic was minimal, and the community was a laid-back thing. We have completely changed. We had a situation here 3-4 years ago where half of the Madeira Beach people who were in power did not get returned and got defeated in elections, and it looks like we're having a return of this little bit of an empire building. It will not enhance my living. Nobody's living in my building will be enhanced, nor will my property value be enhanced, or neighbors across the street, or any of the public will not profit by this, and I think it should be discontinued and aborted.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Excuse me, I'm sorry to bother you. You're going to have to hold it right up to you with...
Hello?
There you go.
Okay. My name's Steve Poling. I live in Shores of Madeira. I just wanted to point out our building's 10 stories over parking, and it's only a little over 100 feet tall. So this building, being 80 feet tall, is going to be approximately up to our 8th floor. They're using 12-foot distance between. We have 8-foot ceilings. So the building's going to be a lot taller than it looks and sounds. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, sir. Would anyone else care to speak? All right, if we could have the developer come and if he could provide answers to the questions that were raised by some of the folks here, we would be interested in
I
that.
can't remember them all. If you could, does anybody have them written down?
Yeah, okay.
One question was the date of completion.
We don't have a date of completion yet. We don't even have a start date. We have to get through this meeting before we can do this approval process first, and then we move to actual plan development. So that'll take several months, and then it'll go to construction. So I don't have a timeline. I can't
There's a
really.
question about the length of the building.
The depth of the building, there's approximately 4,800 square feet per floor. The width is 46 feet between setbacks, so it's a little over 100 feet long.
The next question was how far from the road to the start of the
I don't,
building?
let me see if I can see it on the plan. It's 25 feet. It is 320. It doesn't have that dimension. It just dimensions the front setback at 25 feet. But looking at it, you're probably 80 to 100 feet, 80 feet off the road to the face of the building.
There was a concern about plantings.
The landscaping. What's going to happen is we're going to have to relocate the entrance to the property to the center of the lot because of the way you have to park under the building. So we're going to, some of the landscaping will get removed, most of it will get replaced. The north line will essentially remain unchanged. I'm sure it'll get slightly disturbed, but it'll be replanted. I mean, the landscaping will meet code minimum for the development, whatever required by planning to plant, or when we go through site plan review, will meet all those requirements.
And you did say that the exit and entrance will be to the center?
Yes, it has to be. I mean, it's the only sensible way to do it.
And do you know about 30-day minimum for rentals, anything like that?
We're not going to stipulate, what the owner of the property does with their property. It's, if they buy it, they're free to use it how they see fit.
Okay, and there's no restaurant or
No, there's not going to
anything
be.
planned?
It's residential only. There's no commercial proposed with the property or with the development.
Okay, that's the questions that were asked.
Oh, go ahead.
I think there was one that a gentleman asked about the air handlers
Yes.
on the
Correct.
buildings.
Yeah, we did some research, and there's a lower decibel unit, and then you can put, what they call it, to reduce the noise. So we'll make every effort to make that as quiet as possible, either by dispersion across the roof or the shielding or shrouds.
So you're saying that there's not going to be a condo association that
It'll have an association, but we won't stipulate, we don't necessarily have to stipulate a rental requirement. The declarations can be drafted for the property. So, I don't think it's in our interest to tell the people what the rental can be. If they choose to do with it what they will, then that's their business.
And it,
Yeah, we'll comply with the PD and with whatever zoning currently exists. Right now, it's R3 tourist dwelling unit zoning. We're not asking to change that, and we'll comply with that zoning. We're just changing the height requirement and the setback for the landscaping. That's all we're requesting a variance for.
the
Could you
planning-
comment on
yes,
that
the
one?
Planning Commission is able to make recommendations. What you're hearing in regards to the 30-day rental for the others is that it's in their condo documents. And what you'd be specifying here is even before the condo documents are drawn up, that the city itself will enforce a 30-day rental requirement. In the case of both the neighboring condos, those are enforced by their associations.
Right.
And in their legal documents. You are able to make whatever recommendation you think appropriate regarding use to the city commission.
Okay. Thank you. Any more questions by commissioners? Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome.
Linda, if you could please make a request, if you could reiterate for all of us on commission what the request is for us to vote on this evening.
The request is for a rezoning for approximately 0.55 acres of land currently designated R3 to a PD use to allow for 6-story building of 5 floors of residential units and associated at-grade parking as a multifamily / tourist dwelling use, and that be done including all staff recommended conditions.
Okay, so all commissioners understand that. All right, may I have a motion for this item?
I'll make a motion that we approve PD 2018-02, the petition by the applicant, CPWG Development, as agent for property owner, 49th Investments, LLC, requesting rezoning of approximately 0.55 acres of land located at 14508 or 15408 Gulf Boulevard from R3 to PD to allow for a 6-story building of 5 floors of residential units and associated at-grade parking as a multifamily tourist dwelling use. Such approval is conditioned upon all 15 staff listed requirements and their subsections being met prior to final approval with a maximum of 12 units on the site.
Thank you. Mike, do I have a second?
I will second it, but does that include the Department of Transportation?
That's automatic.
That's
automatically
automatic.
part of the deal.
That's one of the stipulations.
Okay.
Okay.
Then I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion?
May I?
Yes.
If the commission has any concerns about assurances made, in particular in regards to, say, the efforts being made to design for noise on the top of the building, you can add conditions of that nature, since they've already said that they were willing to do that. We don't have any specific standards for that at this point, but because the assurance was made in this meeting, it'll go forward to the commission at any rate, if you're interested in that.
I think that's a very important issue.
Should that be an amendment to the original motion?
Yes, if you're interested in doing that.
And I also think a stipulation for rental ought to be before somebody buys into the
Okay,
building.
let's have an amendment first, if someone cares to make an amendment regarding the air conditioning.
I'll make the amendment for the air
You
handlers.
would have to accept the amendment from the first motion.
I'm willing to accept that amendment.
The second has to accept.
Do you care to
Second that.
amend for the amendment for air? Okay,
And then you will vote on that.
okay, okay. All those in favor of the motion? Wait a minute, roll call, please.
Yes. Commissioner Rappa,
Yes.
Commissioner Hearn,
Yes.
Second Vice Chair Wyckoff,
Yes.
and First Vice Chair Belaski.
Yes.
And then I think there should be some stipulation about the rental, because that will have an impact on what goes on in the building, like what people were talking about prior. So I would think if somebody's going to buy $1 million condo, they would want to know what the rental stipulations are. So I make a motion.
You would have to get you need to discuss that among you
Yeah,
and then
I
get.
mean, technically, we'd have to withdraw what we just did, right, to make an amendatory motion on that. And I would not be in favor of that.
No. Okay. So there, okay. Is there a second to the motion,
It wasn't accepted. You would have to make a whole new motion.
I know. So we disqualify and we start over again. If she would like to add that amendment too.
She could make a motion for a replacement action by the board and see if the replacement is accepted by the commission.
Because I don't think all three should be lumped together. We can't vote to tie in one more amendment to the original motion and the first amendment.
You could have accepted the original motion. Author did not accept that. So at this point, the only way to go forward would be to make a separate motion to incorporate all of it together and see if that passes the board.
Okay. Okay. So, will the maker of the motion initially for approval restate his motion for approval?
My motion for approval of PD 2018 I just turned the page, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's right.
02, as was read into the record, was to approve the rezoning upon all the conditions of all 15 staff listed requirements and their subsections being met prior to final approval with a maximum of 12 units on the site. And then the amendment to that was acceptable was to add noise abatement to the HVAC units.
Okay. And there's a motion. Do we have a second?
That's already been passed.
Okay. Now, let us look at an additional amendment then.
Yes.
Would you care to make that amendment?
Yes, I think that we need to have the stipulation of the rental on the condos.
Okay, would you?
For at minimum 30 days.
Okay. Is there a second to that amendment?
It was my understanding that the condo documents would state that.
The developer said he wasn't going to stipulate.
They can, but we don't know what the documents will
Right.
state at this time.
So the current zoning there permits shorter term rentals.
Yes, it does.
And it is as little as one
One
day,
night,
right?
yes.
Anything west of Gulf Boulevard permits short-term rentals.
Correct.
That's where it stands now. The condo association can make more restrictive covenants in their association documents, but they can never in any other zoning category make less restrictive because that would be against city code. But right now, it's wide open to do whatever they want to do with them once they acquire them, dependent upon the passing of their condominium documents that the developer proposes to the association.
Correct.
Right.
We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Okay, the motion fails for lack of second. Now, could we go back to the original motion for roll call vote, please?
I don't think you have to because you have amended it again. You already voted
Oh,
on it.
we're done, just because, okay. Then we're done. Okay, next. Planning Commission discussion. Do we have any new business? All right, our next meeting is March 11th, as stated on the agenda, at 6 o'clock. We're now adjourned.